Hi there, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to check out this entryway table that we did for commission for a company here in my town. While doing this piece, I definitely learned a lot. We tried new things and we had lots and lots and lots of sanding to do. But of course we'll explain that on the way. As per usual, when you start any project, the first thing you want to do is take off the hardware. This one was actually missing a piece of handle, so what we're going to do is we're going to replace it with another type of handle. But of course, as usual, we want to clean it. And I tend to use TSP or Trisodium Phosphate, which is a hard surface cleaner. It's really good at what it does. I mean, take a look at that. That was just the first pass. And there it is again. Pretty gross, right? But that's the power of Trisodium Phosphate. That's why I like it. After cleaning it, I noticed a few dings that needs our help. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fix this foot. It was missing a big chunk in the leg. So we take some wood filler, putty it up, throw it on, let it harden. And of course, anytime after wood filler is hardened, you want to sand that down. We're going to use 150 grit and 220 grit sandpaper with my Black & Decker block sander. And once we were done with the foot, we flipped it over so we can sand down the other few parts that we put the wood filler in, and then we're going to take care of the rest of the table. Now, normally when you sand, you want to sand in the direction of the grain. This particular table had grain in all directions, so I was constantly having to turn the sander. It was an interesting experience. I'll tell you, block sanders are not exactly the best tool for every job, but it's all I had, and sometimes you just gotta work with what you have. Once I was done sanding, I grabbed a damp cloth to wipe up as much sawdust as I possibly can off the table. Now normally I like to use water-based primers like this Bullseye 123 primer from Zinsser, but because there was some areas that didn't completely come off, I wanted to see if it was going to bleed. So I tested a few areas by just rubbing some of the primer on and let it dry to see how much it bled through. The first part I did on the corner, and the second part I did on the bottom shelf. Now, after letting it dry, I noticed that there was some bleed through, and that wasn't going to work at all on both the top and the bottom. The plan for this table was to stain the top and paint the rest of it. So I wanted to test the top to see if I could indeed stain it the way it is, or if I had to take it down to bare wood. In this case, I'm using the Varathane Espresso stain, and I needed to glove up and use some of this cheesecloth to test a corner. A little note here, when you go to buy gloves, make sure you buy latex gloves. After I ran out of these latex gloves, I went out and bought vinyl gloves, and those rip at every possible moment. These latex gloves are very flexible, they're very bendable, and if you need to cinch them down onto your hand or move them for any reason, they're not going to rip on you between your fingers, at the base, etc., where the vinyl ones rip as often as it can. Now, after testing the stain and wiping it off, I noticed that I had to take it down to bare wood. And honestly, I'm glad I did. Because once I was done sanding all of this, it looked phenomenal. But like I said at the beginning of the video, doing this, there was lots and lots and lots of sanding. The plan for this piece was to stain the top and to paint the rest of it. So it's time to take care of the top and make sure that we got no paint on it. I did not have any painter's tape, so I had to use duct tape. You got to use what you got to use, right? Now that we got that all taped off, I went out and bought some shellac-based spray primer to spray the rest. I don't carry this in a can because I don't use it in my normal sprayer, so this just seemed easier, better application, and less loss, to be honest. Generally, your water-based primers are going to be the easiest to use, especially if you have a paint sprayer. It's not going to gum up your sprayer, and it's a lot easier to clean. But in cases like this, where you're going to have some bleed through from some old finish, buying a couple cans of oil-based or shellac-based primer works just as well. Now, once that's all finished, you want to come back through and sand it. I use this 320 grit sanding sponge from 3M to sand down all the ridges and whatnot that happened from the sprayer. But it also gives it a texture for the paint to adhere to when I come through and paint it. Spoiler alert, white was a terrible color for a primer in this particular piece. And of course, anytime you sand, gotta come through and wipe it up. And thus starts the next learning opportunity. I use this can of Royal paint in the color Innocent Smile. Innocent Smile is a cream-based color. Cream on white does not work very well, and you'll see why. So I planned on using my Wagner Flexio 5000 to spray it on. And of course, anytime you use a paint sprayer, you want to test out and make sure that you're getting the right pattern of spray, the right amount coming out, etc., before you even touch your piece. Now notice, you can hardly see the cream color on the white base. Again, that was a learning experience because this made it so much harder to see if I was getting any color on there whatsoever. So if you're ever painting a piece white, make sure to grab a gray or a black primer. That way you can actually see the application of your paint and you're not having to second guess yourself over and over again the entire time. Now that we've put down our layer of paint, it's time to take off the top. And look how gorgeous that is. I honestly had to take a little bit of time to see if I still wanted to stain the top or not. Because it, in comparison with the rest of the base, was beautiful. So while I was still thinking about the top, it was time to do the next thing I needed to do, which was glaze the base. And we're using the espresso colored stain to glaze the base. Now, I initially thought that whatever stain you use on the top and the doors or wherever else you're going to use it, that's the color you want to go for with the rest of the piece, which in practice is true. But if you're going to stain something like this and you want it to be the dark color that it is, you need to make sure that you're doing it on a pure white base. Because here, the Innocent Smile is a cream color. And I realized after I was done that the cream colored paint with the espresso colored stain made a purple. Now here's the cool thing. This was a commission piece for a company here in town, Omega Cleaning. Omega Cleaning's colors is mostly purple. So this was a happy consequence because it worked out in the end. But just something to note, when you glaze, you need to figure out how it's going to look when you're done. Because this came out purple and I was not expecting purple at first. But it still looked really good. Something else to note while you're glazing is because the type of glaze I'm using here is extremely runny, you're gonna need to go and wipe it up multiple times. Even though I wiped it up once, I ended up wiping the same areas over and over again because there's still runs that were happening because it's a liquid-based stain. So now it's time to start prepping the top for getting stained. Here I used 150 grit sandpaper and I wrapped it around my sanding sponge so I had a way to grip the sandpaper, because with my big hands, just folding it in half does not work very well. Normally you want to go with the grain, but in this case all we're doing is scuff sanding it and getting it roughed up a bit so that the stain has something better to adhere to. So in which case, it doesn't really matter too much. Now here I didn't exactly have a whole lot of stain left, but a lot of surface area to do. So I ended up just pouring it on and wiping it on with a sponge brush. And at the end here, I ended up using cheesecloth to wipe on some stain onto the edges. Now it's time to work on the drawers. So as we did with the table, we had to clean the top. And once again, look how nasty that is. So here once again, we're going to be trying something new. We're going to be trying this easy off oven cleaner as a way to remove the old finish. I've seen and heard a lot about how it does really well with removing finish, and so I figured we would try it out as an alternative to applying Clean Strip Chemical Stripper. And on top of trying out the Easy Off, I wanted to try out different ways to remove the Easy Off, to remove the old finish. And so on one side, I had the 5-in-1 painter's tool, and on the other, I used steel wool. After 15 minutes and having removed it with both tools, I feel that the 5-in-1 painter's tool, the scraper way, actually did a better job. So here we are filling the old holes with wood filler. I tried to get one that is quote unquote stainable, but as I found out, there's not really a very good stainable wood filler out there. But we needed to apply the new handles, so it didn't really matter. Now, before we start doing any form of staining, we need to paper up the opening so that the stain doesn't fall through and get into the drawer itself. And I'm sure by now you guys are sick and tired of watching sanding, so I saved you the trouble and skipped forward to just brushing it off because we're going to go straight into staining. Now while staining this, I noticed a couple of things. The first is some of the areas the stain is getting dried up and absorbed way too quickly, and in other areas it's not getting absorbed enough. So I think what happened here is that in some areas I sanded down a little too much, and in others I didn't sand enough, which is why we see some splotchy staining spots. And if you look close enough, you can actually see the two holes where we put in the wood filler. Like I said, wood filler doesn't really absorb stain as well as we would hope and like, but in this case, it had to be done. And it's not as noticeable as it could be. So here I'm trying a second layer of stain so that hopefully some of those spots absorb a little bit more so that it matches the rest and becomes a bit more uniform. And now it's time to top coat. Here I'm using a water-based polyurethane in my sprayer. Again, water-based is easier to clean, so it makes sense to use it, and it's a really durable and really great top coat to use. It does have a curing time, as all top coats do, of about 30 days, so make sure that you're not overusing it in that first 30 days. And now for the final piece, to get rid of that brushed bronze and add in some metallic silver. Now before the final reveal, let's take a look at what it looked like when we first started. Now here it is. Those handles look amazing against that darker wood. That purple tint in the cream color actually looks quite amazing. This turned out to be a really nice piece. Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed that makeover. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe for more videos and hit that notification bell so you're notified anytime a new video comes out. If you're looking for more flips like this, be sure to click on one of these videos right here. And as always, have an amazing day.